Amazon procurement women are back. We are recording on a kind of gloomy, overcast Sunday here in the Bay Area. And continuing on with our AI theme, I think we've talked about it in almost every episode and mentioned it's going to be a big focus. We're going to talk about something kind of off the cuff, right? The kind of our MO, just things that we experience or come across that we think are interesting to our audience. So, Dr. Elouise, what are we going to chat about today?
I have been blown away by a new tool that Google released, I don't know, some months ago. I just got hooked on it about 3 weeks ago, and I've been telling absolutely everybody about it. And it's called NotebookLM. And if you use it already, then you're way ahead of the game. And undoubtedly, this is such a powerful tool, and it's going to be extended and do amazing things. But I was just about to tell Sarah how great it was and show her, and she said, well, why don't we just make this part of our episode? So what I'm going to do is just walk everybody through this, or walk Sarah through this, and talk about how I'm using it in my own research, and then sort of maybe perhaps comment on how I expect this to be used wide scale. I mean, in weeks, if not months, certainly not years, because this tool is powerful. It's out today. And with that preamble, I'm going to start sharing.
So if you're listening and you have the ability to convert to YouTube, I would recommend that for this episode, just so you can see. We're going to do a screen share here.
And I'll try to be as descriptive as I can. Actually, I've listened to a lot of tutorials on this while I've been walking. So you actually can get a gist of what it does, even if you're just listening. So don't tune us out just yet. It might be interesting to listen and then go home and try it out. It is free as of now. It's also still in development, so I don't think it's a formally released product as such, but boy, howdy, is it super compelling. All right. So what you have here is you basically have different notebooks or collections of elements. And I'll just create a new one. You hit create new, and essentially you're given a workspace with 3 different areas. On the left is where all your sources go. The middle is your chat interface, and the right is the extended features. And so I'll talk about each one of these. So what I love about the add source is you can connect to your Google Drive. It will bring in Google Slides. You can bulk upload bunches of PDF files, or I don't know all the different formats, but all kinds of files. But it'll also, you can link to websites and YouTube, and it'll go grab all the information from those sites or the transcript and bring them into your project, or you can just cut and paste text in. The free version, I think, is 20 sources or 50, I can't remember. But if you pay for the upgrade, you can have 300 data sources, which is super impressive. So you push your data up, and then once your data...
Let me make sure I understand, just so it's really easy for our listeners. So let's say I have 3 PowerPoints, 2 Excel spreadsheets, and 15 websites. All of that goes in this area.
Yes.
Okay, so I can attach files, I can put links. It's going to go and pull data from it in multiple formats.
Correct. I don't think it does tabular data Excel files yet, but I would expect that, who knows, even by the time this episode launches, we might have that. So,
but the reason I ask is for those, like, I use ChatGPT quite a bit, and I toggle back between the different versions. I primarily use ChatGPT 4 and O3 Mini, and some of the versions don't allow attachments and some do. So that's why I was want. So in this model, you can attach things.
And actually, you actually got to the gist of this tool. This tool is for your documents, your 300 documents, or your 20 documents, or your 5 documents. It is basically the ability. So you see the second, it leads into the second panel here. The second panel is, this allows you to interrogate the documents that you uploaded in the left panel. So it's like a private chat GPT.
So I upload. So again, we're looking at 3 panels, kind of like Trello. For those of you that use that project management tool, there's columns. So left column is where I upload, or sorry, center column is in this view is where I upload. And then the things that I save show up on the far left. Am I
Yes.
looking at that correctly? Okay. And then what comes out on the right-hand column?
So once you've put your documents up there, on the right, you have a series of tools where it'll create a study guide. You could create an FAQ. It can build a timeline. It can build a briefing doc. And also what it'll do, and this is one of the killer features, is it will build a dynamic podcast that is actually very interesting. And it doesn't read what's in there, it interprets what's in there, and then builds a dynamic on the fly podcast that is actually very interesting. They make it very compelling. And one of sort of the deep features is, not only can you listen to this podcast, but you can actually interrupt it and ask questions as if you were a call-in audience. It's wild. And I'm going to go through all of this in detail here in a
So
second.
let me make sure I understand that what you just said. So I upload my 20 data sources.
Yep.
It can then turn that into a podcast.
Correct. Now, there are tools that do this outside of this,
Okay.
but if you have a research project, which is what I'm going to show you next, then it becomes very compelling.
Yeah. So around the holidays, there were a couple different procurement podcasts that did a quote special edition with Santa Claus. And they used, I don't know what tools, but they used something where they fed the data or
Yep.
information, and then it spit back a podcast with the host being a voice of Santa Claus. So I'm assuming it's kind of something similar to that.
Exactly. So let me go to one of my notebooks. So for those that don't know, one of my research projects outside of work is studying women in the US Coast Guard. And so I've been collecting data sources for 10 years. I've gone to archives, I've grabbed things off the internet, and I have a couple hundred data sources. And so what I did, so you can see the same thing that I just showed you now with 120 files. So I have all these PDFs. I gave it some YouTube URLs. So these are all my sources on the left. And then what you see automatically in the middle panel is it summarizes all of those 120 sources. And so it will allow me to ask questions of the data. It will create, again, this audio overview. It will create a briefing document. In fact, actually, why don't I just click the briefing document and let's see what comes back. Go ahead.
So in this case here, it's taking all the data that you've fed it on the left, and then it's summarizing it on the right.
Yep.
Okay.
And so let's read the summary. So this is a briefing document summarizing the themes and key ideas from the provided sources. So that's 120 documents it just went through and is now giving an overview of the main themes, the key ideas. We're scrolling through, you can see that recruitment and training is a key idea, integration and acceptance, post-war adjustments, changing attitudes and opportunities, heightened weight standards, limitations, and so on and so forth.
Now,
So
did you give that prompt at the beginning? Is that the prompt that you gave
no,
it?
no, it does that I just clicked the briefing. It has a pre-built button
Okay,
that
so
says
this was no prompt,
no
loading the
prompt.
data and just selecting the briefing doc.
Correct. Now, what I can do is I can say, I want to write an academic article
Mhm.
about women in the U.S. Coast Guard. So I'm now prompting it. I want to write an academic using this data. Please create an outline. Boom. And probably within 5 seconds, it's going to come back with an academic level ready outline. And to me, this is just stunning. There it is. And so it gives us an outline of this. And again, ChatGPT can do this, except it doesn't have my 120 documents. And this is very nuanced to my very narrow, which is why I show this example all the time. This is my very narrow research subject. And so it gave me a title. It gave me bullet points for an abstract, the introduction, the historical background, post World War II integration. And it's building this based on all the data that I've gone and collected.
So I would be curious to test this. So in ChatGPT in version 4, so again, I toggle back and use different versions. Version 4 allows you to do attachments. I've not tried something at that scale where I have 120 data points.
Yep.
I wonder how that works, because you can upload documents to ChatGPT and you can do the same prompt and say, go through and assess the information I've uploaded and then create X, Y, and Z. But the question is, can you input that many data sources? And it's not something I've gone through and done yet.
So according to my quick Google search, while you were asking that question, it's 20 files.
Okay.
So
that's a big, for those listening, if you're having a lot of data points and a lot of research, that seems like that's where this really comes into play, which ChatGPT doesn't allow that volume.
right. And again, like by the time this episode premieres, I'm sure there'll be 6 other tools.
Yeah.
Like anything that I'm showing here is not all that like
It's
it's
not
not
groundbreaking, it's just showing
not at all.
AI in action.
But perhaps the more important takeaway is just how easy this is.
Oh, yeah.
Once you sort of get the kind of gist of this, it becomes so powerful because I mean, if I had had this tool when I was in grad school, I would have I would have been done in like 6 months. Because I mean, even as of last summer, I went through all of these documents and pulled information out to basically do what it just did here in the center screen. So I spent a good month last summer, and that wasn't the first month I had spent on this data either. So this is like the fact that it's all right here and it's very clear is really, really amazing.
Well, and to your point, I think the implications for this for procurement are just incredible. For example, I'm building an RFP. I can load any data point I want, internal and external, and write an RFP probably start to finish in 10 minutes.
Easy. And this is where I think the notebook concept comes in, because category managers have, or sourcing managers, however it's structured, have run these types of events. And we were talking about travel as a category. Well, I've run the same variations on RFPs for travel, for hotels, for airlines, for rental cars. It's not going to change that much. So I should have, like I can have a repository of all these documents right here. And that's the staggering thing. And then as you are able to add tabular data with Excel and whatnot that comes, SRM is going to be right there. And that's I think the power of this. I mean, this is really fundamental.
Well, just think about too in procurement, all the documents, processes, policies, just all the things in a month that someone working in procurement is working on. I mean, this will save hours and hours of time.
Right. And what I would also add is that when you if you pair this with was it the deep research
Deep
or
research.
the
Yep.
yeah, where you can send the agent out to go do deep research on the travel category, the corporate travel category, the corporate IT services. All of a sudden now you can pair that with this. So actually there are tutorials where you can run the deep research, put the output into a Google Doc, which then is pulled into here. So now I can do research on a category, have it embedded here, let's say with RFPs and whatnot. And it's just like, this is where it talks about work smarter, not harder. And if you just take the time, and what's amazing about this is you can learn, like I learned this in like 5 minutes, and that the power of this just becomes so astronomical. And that's what I like about this and I like ChatGPT too for the same reason. It's just very accessible to non-technical users.
Shout out if any of our listeners work for OpenAI, work the labeling in ChatGPT is very poor. It's got I use a Teams account, so I have a paid, and when you click on the drop down, it's got ChatGPT 4 with scheduled tax 01, 02, 03, and there's very little description explaining what each version does. So it would be helpful to end users like myself if there was a really quick, easy description on when to use each, because that's my biggest challenge is figuring out when to flip back and forth, other than the version 4 allows for attachments and version 3 does not. Again, that could all change tomorrow, where attachments are just universal. But I do think for the AI companies building this, labeling is important so people know what to use when.
Well, and I think this is where OpenAI had a real advantage early on. It made this very simple chat interface and voice interface as well. But I think as you start to, especially in business, what they've done, what Google's done with NotebookLM here is really powerful in that it just makes sense and it connects to the other Google products. So I don't have to go hunting and worrying about all this other stuff. And what I read is this is private, so it's not being, my data is not being used to train the other the public version. So there are some really, and so I think this is where Google, where they were behind, have really sort of stepped ahead, because this makes sense. This kind of tool makes sense in an academic setting, in a corporate setting, because we need a little bit more structure than and I love I'm a big open AI person, but sometimes you just have to have a little bit more structure.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm looking. So I have not used NotebookLM. Again, I'm a big ChatGPT user. We have a paid Teams account at my company. My marketing team also uses a platform called Writer, which is heavy focused on content, especially if you want more human or personal or interesting sounding content. But their website is pretty cool. The Notebook LM, it's very simple. They're really trying to kind of hone in on their focus on this whole research piece. Load all your research, and um, we'll spit back in a very useful, easy to consume, but also helping give you insights so
Yeah.
you can act quickly. Those kind of look like they're three buckets that they're pushing.
Yeah. Um, and then what I like about this is that, as I said, the audio overview. So while we were talking, I had it generate an audio overview. And again, I find these voices compelling, and this is all AI generated, and it's interpreting all of that data that I just uploaded. So let's take a quick listen and see what we got here.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today's topic, I got to say, it's really fascinating. We're diving into the history of women in the U.S. Coast Guard.
Yeah, definitely a rich history there. A lot to uncover.
Exactly. And the really cool thing is we have such a variety of sources to work with. I mean, we've got personal diaries, official documents, academic studies, and even some oral histories. This is going to be quite the journey.
You're not kidding. It's not just about names and dates.
Mm.
We're going to hear those personal stories, understand the context, really get a sense of these women's lives and how they shaped the Coast Guard.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So there you go. I mean, I thought that was pretty compelling.
And then how does it work on the back end? Are you inputting, I want a male voice, I want a female voice, I want it to sound like
nope.
this?
No. Those are customizations that will come later. You can make some adjustments to it, but in general, it's just the male and female voice right now.
Well, and again, this is in beta, so I feel
Correct.
like there's a lot of opportunity for them to enhance, and there's a whole world out there of upcharging, right, to people who want to change the characters, especially podcast users who want to start leveraging this to do, a whole series of podcasts where the host doesn't actually have to host. You just feed your data and insights into it.
Well, right. And there are now tools that do exactly that all you do is feed it and it creates dynamic podcasts. I mean, in some way, I think that's how a lot of podcasts are going to go. What I like about this tool is it has an interactive mode where those two voices are going, and then we can interrupt the podcast and ask a question, and the two voices will acknowledge. They'll say, let's take a question. We have a question from the audience. In fact, let me try this. Let's see if this works. I don't know if it'll work.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today's topic, I got to say, it's really fascinating. We're diving into the history of women in the U.S. Coast Guard.
Yeah, definitely a rich history there. A lot to uncover.
Exactly. Oh, hey there. What's up?
Hey, can you tell me how many women served in the Coast Guard during World War II?
Oh, hey, great question.
Yeah, that's a key number to really understand their impact.
So the Coast Guard was the smallest unit.
Right, compared to the other branches.
They enlisted about 11,000 women during World War II.
That's a significant contribution.
Absolutely, especially considering the Coast Guard's size.
Now, let's jump back into our planned discussion.
Okay, so the really cool thing is we have such a variety of sources.
That's like amazing,
No,
isn't it?
it's so the interaction is so interesting, having the two voices versus just the main narrator. So my immediate thought is, how do I fact check that? How do I know that's right?
Right. Well, I think this is so when we like blather on and on about AI and taking jobs and all this, there's really two takeaways, and why I think humans still remain very important in this. All of everything that led up to that podcast or that sort of briefing was based on the data that I fed it. So I went to the archives. I designed my research agenda around this very specific topic, and I had to figure out what sources and dig those up. So it was a very human aspect. And of course, there's a natural bias to that. Like, I can see the bias because I actually interrogated each of those sources before I put them up into the NotebookLM. So number one is curating the sources and making sure we've got the right sources to feed the research question. The second is, as you said, is to validate this. And so I am the wrong person to validate the validity of corporate travel as a category. But if it's U.S. women or if women in the U.S. Coast Guard, as a historian, I have enough experience to validate everything that it's saying. So again, I think that's where the human oversight comes in. It's getting me to that oversight place so much faster.
Well, it's getting you to a point where you can then input when they were having that conversation with that data point, then you do your own quick research and say, is this data point accurate or not? If it's not, you can feed it and update the dialogue. But I just caution people, critical thinking is really important, especially with AI. And with this being so easy now, I mean, people can just start producing absolutely anything, and you can't just trust everything you read or hear, which we all know. But I think it's even more important now with the ability to use AI so easily.
Well, and that's what's going to separate the those that excel and those that don't, is the ability to have those critical thinking skills. And because it's not about writing the algorithm or analyzing the data, it's really very much what you're seeing here. Because as a non-technical user, I can generate massive amounts of content, and because I did the curation of the data sources and I can validate the output, I could create an entire podcast, an article, and a book about US women in the Coast Guard in a fraction of the time.
And you could
Again,
probably stand up a website in an hour,
oh,
and then you
easy.
have people going to the website thinking that that's the source of truth.
Right. And again, if yeah, like you said, fact checking this, and so, just to sort of, another sort of use case I've seen is, you can, for doing your annual review, you can upload all of the things you did each year, and it'll write your annual performance evaluation, which is, like, I haven't tried that yet, but I mean, think about that kind of a use case. It's so, like the power in this, because who likes writing their own performance review? It's like, hey, I'm great and I did a million things this year. So having this passionate third party write your
Well,
performance review.
and I would
Yeah.
add to that, what's even more powerful to me, yes, that will save a ton of time, but asking, where did I fall short?
Yes.
I-
Yes.
If my boss is reading this report, what would their criticism be? So that will help you tweak and modify before you're actually submitting it, so you can predict where the focus and growth areas.
Yeah. So I think, again, this is a great sort of way station or marker towards this AI enabled workforce. And the fact that I can do this outside. And this is why a lot of these tools that I use my women in the Coast Guard data set, because it's a lot easier, because I don't have to worry about privacy. It's all public. Everything I have is public domain. So it's very easy to try all these tools and get myself up to speed on these AI tools without having to go through the corporate bureaucracy. And that's where, Carney has its own limitations. Every corporation has its own limitations, but that doesn't mean the technology is not powerful and you shouldn't start using it.
Drop us a note in the chat if you are using NotebookLM. We'd love to hear if there's specific use cases, things that you found it to be really helpful, or areas where it falls short.
Or other tools that are similar. I expect this will launch in like 2 weeks, but I imagine within 2 weeks we'll, OpenAI will have their competitor, and DeepSeek and whoever else will be doing their own thing.
All right, I think that's a wrap. We will be back next Wednesday.
Oh, wait. Before we sign off, I have to give a friend of our show, Conrad Smith from Graphite, for turning me on to
We got a
NotebookLM.
shout out, Conrad.
Shout out, Conrad. I almost forgot. He showed it to me, and I got so excited that I have been like telling everybody about it. I forgot that he's the one. So shout out to Conrad.